Informative and unpredictable, testing the limits like only we can. From Span Enterprises in Rock Hill, South Carolina, it's The Bandit Room.
And welcome to The Bandit Room. I'm Charles, this is Casey, and our special guest today is Mr. Sandy Newton. Sandy is the owner of Insurance Brokers Exchange. You've been in the insurance business a long time. Tell us a little bit about what you do, Sandy.
Mainly what our company does is we provide employee benefits to employers around the York, Lancaster, Chester area, those counties. And we also work with individuals. Now mainly it's through the Affordable Care Act, but most of what we do or we concentrate on is health insurance.
Okay. So we know you through our business relationship. You know us through that, through Span Enterprises.
Right.
But you also work with individuals. So somebody off the street could also come to Insurance Brokers Exchange and just talk about, their insurance needs and what they could get set up.
We actually get that a lot because there are not many people that want to deal with the Affordable Care Act. And what most people don't understand is when I say the Affordable Care Act, people think, oh, it's that Obamacare or it's where I'm getting a subsidy.
Right.
If you came in just off the street and you didn't qualify for a subsidy, we would still be selling you the same exact thing that we're selling that person that is getting the subsidy. So therefore, it's all under the Affordable Care Act.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, insurance, it's a very broad field. There's a lot that you could do to delve into it. I'm to try to keep it relatively general. Now, what would you say is an area that most people, in your experience, are underinsured? I mean, everybody knows, like, you got to have health insurance. Obviously, if somebody's not having health insurance, it's a huge risk. Anything else that you would point out?
You could pick any one of them you wanted to. A lot of people are underinsured on life insurance. Underinsured on their disability coverage, short-term, whether it be short-term disability, long-term disability. There's something out there, y'all are way too young to really think about it yet, but long-term care.
Yeah.
There are a ton of people that don't have that, and that's probably, long-term care would be the thing that most people don't have.
Yeah.
It's so expensive, and you really have to have a lot of income to purchase long-term care.
That's an interesting point. So what age do you think people should start thinking about long-term care insurance? It's something that people don't typically think about for a while.
You probably should start, in your 20s, but it's not going to happen. It probably doesn't happen. It doesn't.
Right.
Most people really don't purchase long-term care until they hit 50.
Right, but your rates are increasing at that point, right?
Correct.
So you could lock in a good rate in your younger years.
Right.
You're going to be paying under your younger years.
Yeah, but you could be 25 years old and not have to use it till you're 80, so you paid for 55 years, even though you got a much cheaper premium. I would say the average person probably doesn't look until they hit 55 to 57, somewhere in that range.
So that's an acceptable place to start, or I mean,
absolutely.
You should start earlier, but that's still okay.
I had a lady that came in; she was 80 years old, and wanted to start looking. Well, the insurance carrier wouldn't cover them.
Right.
They were too old, and they waited too long.
So.
And the expense.
Definitely a huge thing. I know my grandparents actually just moved into assisted living, and they had been paying for long-term care insurance for a long time. And he was like, they keep raising the rates. It's going to be better for me to just move in. Just move into a facility. And
right. And the key thing you said was assisted living. Right. Because I've got 4 older sisters, and one of my sisters came to me and said, I'm ready to move into Westminster Towers.
Right.
And I said, okay. And she said, can I use my long-term care? I went, no. Just because you're retiring doesn't mean you could use it for that.
Not for a retirement home. It would have to be for some sort of
it would have to be assisted living, yes.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, well, that's helpful. Now, you mentioned short-term disability. I know you have a personal situation with short-term disability where it really came into...
Yeah, so I signed up for short-term disability just kind of on a whim. I didn't really foresee myself really necessarily I would need it anytime in the future. I wasn't planning on having like a serious illness or breaking any bones. Then I got pregnant.
Right.
Would you say that short-term disability is an option that most women typically do know to utilize, or do you think it's kind of something that they find out? Because to me, had I found out after the fact that I could have signed up for short-term disability to assist me during my maternity leave, I would have been devastated that I didn't know to sign up for that. So would you say it's typically women know to utilize that and sign up for it, or would you say?
I would say an insurance agent should tell you that.
Right.
So in other words, if I come into your business
Right.
and I didn't tell you that,
Right.
that was a mistake on my part.
Which you did. You did.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did. But I just want to make sure that, because there are, your business is big enough where y'all can offer short-term disability.
Yeah.
There are these small businesses out there that are too small, and carriers don't want them.
Right.
So you might have a 4-person group that does not offer short-term
Right.
disability. So you were fortunate to work for an employer
Right.
that offered it. Not all employers offer it.
Yeah. Which is, I can see how that could be very unfortunate for some people. Yeah.
For sure.
It is, and just to kind of touch on what you're talking about. So with the short-term disability, everybody thinks, well, I've got to be real sick or I've got to be hurt. In Casey's case, you can't see right now, but she's pregnant, and it does pay for maternity as any other illness. So yes, that is a very good benefit.
Yeah, and I think it's something that even the younger generation that are coming into that phase of their life, if you started a company, you're offered insurance, you should think about that. Is that something in your plan for the next year? Are you going to actively be trying to start a family? I think a lot of the younger generation sees, well, this is just more money that'll come out of my paychecks. I'm not going to do that right now, but you almost have to future-proof yourself if that's kind of the direction you want to go.
And you pegged it.
Yeah.
Your age group normally, the women do, because if the agent has told everybody properly,
Right.
then the women sit back and say, yeah, I'm going to have a child one day. That would be a good thing. So you're going to get somebody like Charles over here that's going to say, I'm never going to get hurt. I'm not going to get sick. And they don't buy it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, uh-oh. So this is true in all forms of insurance. Males underutilize all forms of insurance, and females use it.
That's interesting. That was my next question. What was probably the most underutilized form of insurance with the younger generation? Or just benefits in general
But
that are offered?
it's really, I was kind of picking on the males. I'm a male and I'm the same way.
Right.
I'm not going to get hurt. I'm not going to get sick. Males are pretty good about buying life insurance. Females, not so much. They don't buy it as much.
Interesting.
Short-term disability, probably more females buy it than males.
Right.
The only product that we sell that it's equal would be health insurance, because we all know you need your health insurance. You got to have it, right?
And now it's the same price, whether you're a male or female.
That's correct. Good point. Very good point. Yes.
Used to not be that way a couple of years ago. But all right, well, we'll see if it lasts. But you had mentioned small businesses. So tell us a little bit about that. So if somebody owns a very small business where it's either just them or them and a couple employees, they're obviously a smaller group. They don't have that sort of network that larger companies get when they're looking for insurance coverage. What sort of options do they have?
Well, of course they have the option on health insurance, and if you go back 10 years ago, you were actually better off to have an individual policy than a group policy. It was cheaper. Exact same benefits, but it was cheaper.
Right.
Now it's turned. The group policies are cheaper and they're better. So when we talk about health insurance, they're not going to have a problem getting that. Any group with 2 or more employees can get that, as long as they meet the requirements of the insurance carrier, which in most cases is we got to have 75% of the eligible employees.
Okay.
Right.
So Casey here has health insurance through her husband, and she doesn't want it here. That's fine.
Yeah.
She's
Is that not considered an eligible employee in that situation? Or
no. She would be considered not eligible, so that helps you.
Gotcha.
The people that are eligible are the people that don't have Medicare.
This is the only
or
option.
yes, this is the only option they have.
Okay.
Right,
Gotcha.
right.
Okay, cool. Well, that's helpful. Now, Sandy, I don't know how much you want to share on this. I know you had a situation last year where it was on a cruise ship, I believe, where you had a particular injury that
Right.
Occurred and
Oh, I don't mind sharing about that.
All right,
It's actually an interesting story. I was not on a cruise ship. I was in the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
And our supper club went and just unfortunate for me, I slipped on the floor. It was a marble floor.
Oh.
And my foot went right and I was going left. And before I even hit the ground, I hollered, "It's broken." Well, it was broken. It was dislocated. Couldn't do anything on it for 3 months. Couldn't drive for 4 months. My wife wasn't real happy about that. And I was very fortunate because I'll just kind of touch on this. You all have this particular plan in here. I have an accident plan. Right. And males don't think they're going to get hurt. The only reason I purchased the accident plan was because it had another benefit on there that said I'll get $100 every time I go to the doctor, up to 2 times per year. And I thought, great, this pays for itself. I'll buy it. Well, I collected a ton off of that accident policy. Because I do want to, if you don't mind, let me tell this one part of the story because I think this is good. So the ambulance came to get me. And you get a benefit for riding in the ambulance. But as we got halfway to the hospital, the ambulance stopped. My wife was in the ambulance with me. The guy in the back with me and my wife went into a building where she had to pay for my ride before I even got to the hospital.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness.
I'm in shock with my ankle. And they stopped. So it's different in different countries. That would never happen in the United States, but it's kind of bad.
How does that work with ambulance rides and insurance? I've never personally had to utilize an ambulance.
You don't.
But I do have a friend who she has insurance, and she recently had to go take an ambulance ride and got a bill for like $5,000. Does that just mean that that's
the
not
going rate for
covered in their? That just seems a little steep.
It is steep. And what happens is, even though you see a rate of $5,000, that's what rate they publish, but they have a negotiated rate. If that service, if they're in network, it's much cheaper. It's usually we've seen bills of $100,000 for somebody to stay in the hospital one night, but the insurance carrier only paid 10.
Whoa.
And the hospital accepted it. So always, whatever you're doing, stay in network. Now, you brought up the ambulance. The problem you have with the ambulance is they're not necessarily in network if they're not owned by the local hospital.
I didn't think about that.
So there's sort of like independent ambulance crews that could randomly get called out to your, just depending on where you are.
It happens. And it's kind of not fair if you think about it, because you didn't ask, you didn't say, oh, wait a minute, let me make, as they're taking you to the hospital, let me make sure you're in network.
Call the right one.
Right. We had a situation where there was a car wreck, and out on the interstate, they went and they had to bring the helicopter out. And that's a great story, $27,000. And that was, they didn't negotiate that rate. That was the rate.
That was the rate.
Wow.
And they were not in network.
And how far was this? Was it?
It was in Seneca when it happened, but this was a client I had insured in Seneca, and they went and picked him up and took him to, it was somewhere in Oconee County. I don't know which hospital. I can't remember which hospital, but
it was local. It was not like a long.
Oh no! It was just because it's quicker to get the helicopter there than get an ambulance there.
Wow.
Wow. That is nuts.
That's crazy.
I started doing the math on maternity bills and things like that, and that makes me feel actually a little bit better. It could be a lot worse.
Right. Well, even with your bills, you're going to see a much higher charge that is going to be negotiated as long as you stay in network, stay with a network hospital, a network doctor. Another thing that happens, we'll have someone that will go to the local hospital that's in network, but the radiologist or the anesthesiologist is not in network.
Wow.
Now, how can you help that? You can't help that.
Do they have to disclose that to you initially?
They don't. You sign a form. You think about it. Whenever you go to the doctor's office or you go in the hospital, you're signing a form saying you agree to pay for this. I wish that didn't happen that often, but it probably happens 1 out of every 20 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
I know to check that.
Yes.
Wow, that is crazy. Now with the, you started with the Affordable Care Act a little bit. What are your thoughts right now as this continues? Obviously, nobody really knows where this is going to go, but things are starting to change. It looks like
Right.
with the last tax bill, they're repealing the individual mandate as of next year, I believe.
Correct.
So that people aren't technically required to buy health insurance.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously people should be buying health insurance in order to protect themselves and things like that, but
So what you're asking, just so you know, is an opinionated question.
yes,
I want to make sure.
Obviously, this is
okay.
an opinion. This is not.
Well, let me back up by saying that, and whether people like it or not, I know I'm in this industry. I don't really like the Affordable Care Act. I don't see how we can sustain the rates that are being charged right now.
Yeah.
I had someone that came in back in November, husband, wife, 3 kids. Their premium was $3,500 a month
Wow.
for health insurance.
Oh my gosh.
And he said, forget it, I'm not going to buy it.
Exactly.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
Yeah.
No, absolutely
So he's
not.
going to pay the penalty. Before the Affordable Care Act came into play, the rates were high. There's no question the rates were high,
Right.
and something needed to be done. I just don't think this was the way to do it, and I don't have the answer. So when you ask what do I think is going to happen, I do think eventually it's going to be kicked out. And I personally hope it's kicked out.
Right.
Because if you have a car wreck, let's say you have 3 or 4 car wrecks
Right.
this year, what's the insurance company going to do to you next year?
Right.
They're going to
They're
raise your
gonna raise
rates,
the rate.
but they're not going to raise Casey's rates.
Right.
Okay? Well, that's what's happened with health insurance is that Casey's going to use her health insurance, you're not going to use yours, but y'all are going to pay the exact same price.
Same premium.
Yeah, and so
Same increases.
I kind of like if you overutilize it and Charles underutilizes it. I kind of like thinking that he gets benefited with a lower premium,
Right.
and
Which
that's
would
the
make
way it used to
sense.
be. It's not that way anymore.
Right.
Now
right.
you're going to pay the same rate.
Right. But do you think we'll be able to retain like the the universally positive aspects of like kids being able to stay on parents' insurance till you're 26? I mean that's pretty much widely accepted. Not being able to refuse insurance because of pre-existing conditions, or do you think that goes along with what you're talking about? I mean, somebody that has terribly ill, I mean, they obviously are higher risk, but they still should probably.
A lot of people don't know this, but prior to the Affordable Care Act,
Right.
most states had what was called a health insurance pool. So if you had somebody that had a major illness, heart, diabetes, cancer, they could get coverage,
Yeah.
but they had to pay a lot more for it.
Okay.
So, I mean, I would kind of like to see that. Then
Kind
you
of
can
high risk pool. That's
a
like
high
what they
risk pool,
refer to
yes,
that. Okay.
but you can make the argument that they can't afford it. So now what do you do?
Right.
I mean, you can argue this thing to death,
Right.
and I do think that's why nothing has been done with repealing and replacing
Right.
Obamacare. There are too many people that have their own agenda and what they believe should
Yeah.
be done and shouldn't be done.
Right. Interesting stuff. What are your thoughts on? So there used to be a high risk pool. Is that through a company, or is that through an insurance company, or is that
No,
like the state is buying this for somebody?
the state, so let's just use the state of South Carolina.
Right.
The state of South Carolina said, okay, Blue Cross, okay, United Healthcare, Aetna, Cigna, whoever is doing business in the state,
Right.
they had to pay into this pool. They had to give money to this pool. And then when they go to sell you health insurance, let's say you've got cancer right now, and they want to charge you $1,000 a month. I know you wouldn't like that.
Right.
But that's a pretty good deal if we
For
know you have
considering
cancer.
this
Yes, you're going to
serious
collect a lot
situation.
more than $12,000 over
Right.
the year, but how does the pool pay for that? Well, they're making the insurance carriers pay into that pool. So it worked,
Yeah.
and there was such a small percentage of the population that bought through the pool. I'm making my numbers up, but it was probably less than 2%.
Interesting. Okay. Now, with the prices increasing and the issues that we've been seeing with the ACA as far as fewer carriers, I know in South Carolina you just one, right? Isn't
Right.
it just Blue Cross
Right.
at this point?
Yes.
So with the insurance carriers dropping out, does that not affect the pricing situation or the availability of insurance that contributes to the problem that we're having?
It does.
So with obviously these insurance carriers are not dropping out for no reason. I don't think they're dropping out just to make a statement. I think if they thought they could make money on it, they would be making money on it. And that's
Right.
one thing that we all assume these insurance companies are able to do. But it's hard for me to reconcile that, because I think, I would think that they would want to obviously be available for everybody, but they're still pulling out of these places.
I've got a great answer for that.
Mhm.
So in 2014, when the Affordable Care Act started,
Yeah.
the insurance carriers were told that for the first 3 years you cannot lose money.
Mm-hmm.
The government guaranteed them that they would not lose money. And I kind of even hate bringing this up because this is getting into the political part of it, but I do want you to know why it is where it is. So y'all are the only two insurance companies that are offering insurance, let's just say right now in South Carolina. And the government has told you you cannot lose money.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the carriers came out and said, wow, we can't lose money. We're going to offer it cheap so that everybody will purchase from us. And they got a larger market share than the two biggest carriers in the state of South Carolina, which are Blue Cross and United Healthcare. Well, they got the largest market share. So in the second year, they lost. Obviously, they lost that first year. They applied to get reimbursed. They got 33 cents on the dollar. So now, Casey over here thinks I'm real smart. I'm going to offer the cheapest rate because I can't lose, right? But now I'm only giving you 33 cents back of every dollar that you lost. That's why the carriers pulled out.
Gotcha. Okay.
They all lost money except for Blue Cross. They were the only carrier in the state that did not lose money. And coincidentally, they were the most expensive.
Right. They kept their prices where
They
they
did,
needed to be.
where they needed to be.
Right.
Right.
Interesting. These are all interesting things. What are your thoughts on shopping for different forms of insurance online versus using somebody like you, for example? Obviously, this is kind of a slanted question. You're going to probably say,
No, that's a good and fair question, and I'm glad you asked it because I think people need to understand it. Whether you buy from the internet or buy from an insurance agent, the price is exactly the same.
Okay.
And people don't understand that. They think I can get it cheaper if I buy it online.
Right.
Here's your problem, and this is a very good example. So this year, under the Affordable Care Act, Blue Cross took an average of a 39% rate increase. Now think about that, 39%.
That's massive.
It is massive. Now that was an average. Well, they decided that there were people that were not getting a subsidy that could get the rate cheaper if they offered another plan. So they came out with a second plan. And so I'm not getting a subsidy, and I go and buy my insurance. Let's just say I buy what's called a Silver One plan, and we'll get into that in a minute. But it would be cheaper for me to change to a Silver 15, which is identical to a Silver One. It would be cheaper. But if you bought online, you would never have known that. So you could be right now, if you're under a Blue Cross plan, you could be paying more than you should be paying. Nothing we can do about it right now because we have that window of opportunity of 6 weeks to change you. But that's one, that is a great question. You would be so much better off because an insurance agent, that's my livelihood. I've got to keep up with what's going on.
Right. Whereas you could just pick the cheapest one, or you just pick whatever looks similar to what you've done before.
Well, I'm glad you said that also because when I started in the insurance industry, my mom was turning old enough to get a Medicare supplement. And I went out and I got her the cheapest one, thinking, isn't that smart? I saved all this money.
Right.
Well, what happened was that carrier decided to pull out of the state of South Carolina. My mom had cancer at this point.
Wow.
And I couldn't get her another Medicare supplement.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So that is another thing. Don't always buy the cheapest.
Right.
Buy the carrier that's going to be there
Yeah.
Yeah.
buy one of the carriers that you've heard of.
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense.
That's about good advice on almost anything.
Yeah.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
And you know, it's hard to pay. I had someone in my office this morning. It's hard to pay $30 a month more for the exact same coverage.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you the carrier that I know will be there 10 years from now. This other carrier may not.
Right.
Don't know.
Hey, that's good. Well, I appreciate you coming in today, Sandy.
Absolutely.
It's been very interesting. It's been a lot of good information, I think. Any other questions?
I'm good, covered a
All
lot.
right. Anything else you want to share? Anything else you need to?
No, just
out there.
I would like to go back to what you
Yeah.
just one more time and touch on the fact that you would be so much better off to go through an insurance agent because we're not only there's so many different factors. Another thing, and this will be my last thing I'll talk
That's
about,
fine.
but when we talk about Blue Cross and we talk about group coverage versus individual coverage, it's two different networks.
Yeah.
So you can go to one of the hospitals in Charlotte under your group coverage. You can't under your individual policy. So always go to someone that is doing this for a living,
Right.
and they're going to charge you the exact same price that you're going to get on the internet.
Right.
Wow. All right. Well, point taken. I think
Okay, good.
Well, thank you very much for coming
Absolutely,
by today.
thank
It's been
you.
a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us today to talk about insurance tips for your everyday life. Join us next week and see what we talk about in the Bandit Room.